are here to continue the conversation around AI and really talk about tension as fuel and how we leverage organizational creativity for transformation. So I want to start with my favorite quote of the year from Shelley Palmer, who's sort of a tech marketing evangelist and consultant. And he believes that AI is not a tech issue, it's a leadership issue. And that's why I'm thrilled that we have these three amazing leaders to talk about AI within their organizations from their own perspective, and hopefully to help all of you understand a little bit more about what you can be doing to really leverage it in addition to all the other conversations that have been had today. So I'm going to start with Peter. So Peter represents our large agency perspective, and you're part of Omnicom as the CEO of BBDO in Atlanta, and I really want you to share more about how have you been able to address AI as the opportunity within your organization and with your teams?
Yeah, thanks, Marla. And yeah, I mean, obviously, AI is everywhere. It's it's everywhere in the conversation. We've heard it all day. For us, being part of Omnicom, we have a sandbox that we can play in. And so, they've rolled it out to all parts of the organization, whether you're in account, whether you're in strategy, creative. And what's interesting is I think once people get over the tension of, oh my gosh, this is going to replace me, then I think the pessimism leads to optimism. And that's what we have to do as leaders, is say, like, this is a groundbreaking technology. Like, don't look at the founders of certain AI companies that are saying, like, it's changing the social contract and life as you know it's going to end and it's going to be different. It's like, no. I mean, basically, it's another tool, and it's another tool to make us smarter, better marketing consultants for our clients. And so I think once the organization gets over that issue of oh my gosh, the fear, then it unleashes a ton of creativity and optimism. So
that's great. So thinking about that, because this really is about how we drive behavioral change for people and the impact on people. So I'd like Amanda to talk about how are you thinking about kind of the future workforce development and the skills that are needed, and how you are evolving the training and education for your team, and then what should agencies do now to stay ahead?
Yeah, I love that question. I think if we take it in sort of two areas, the current staffing that we have today, and then what does this look like for the new folks coming into our industry. So starting with the first one, I think for today, it's about really having those sessions with all of your disciplines, looking for roadblocks and bottlenecks. Because I think we think about AI and we lump automation into it, and it's really separate. So it's like, what can we automate so that we can use AI to release more creativity? So it's really figuring out what your tech stack is going to be, and then thinking about it. And someone said it's moving really slowly earlier today. I think it's moving at the most crazy rapid pace ever. So look at it in 3, 6, 9, and 12 months, because I think decisions 2026 we'll be talking about reasoning and what the thinking aspect of the LLMs are doing. So I don't think we can wrap our brains around where it's going. And so that's a future us problem. But speaking of the future, and I think where there's so much excitement for bringing in a new generation of people into this industry, they will enter as managers, because the people who did the work before, it's going to be automated. None of the things that we all hate doing we'll have to do anymore, and that's what we used to make the new people do. So now those people will come in as managers. We have to give them manager training. And then the other piece that I think is just so exciting about a new generation coming in, they're the ones who are creating culture along with our industry, but they're the 16 and 19-year-olds today are creating the culture, and that's what we can lean into for advertising agencies of the future. It's like, let's use those people, because AI cannot predict the future as much as we like to say it's predictive. It's just not. So let's lean into those folks who are really bringing culture into the forefront and fold that into our organizations.
I think you bring up a really important point for everyone to be thinking about if they haven't already. What do you do as entry-level roles really shift, and you need people who have a breadth of experience and skills at that mid-level, and how do you really deliver on that? I want to move to Micöl and your role as a creative leader. Woo is right. All right. So last week he had a LA Dodgers hat on. Now he's got a Yankees hat on. I don't know what he's representing, but I'd like to understand, how are you thinking about AI in terms of the creative output, and how are you leveraging it and supporting your teams in terms of delivering on creativity opportunities?
I think creative output has different layers to it. I think there's like 3 different forms of creative output. I think there's creative output that's internal. There's creative output that's internal plus client. Then there's like creative output that's out in the world. I think all 3 of them are affected by AI in so many different ways, whether it's just like the flexibility of it, just more robust in general, the immediacy of it. And I think, equity has been a big issue for creativity for a very long time, especially including Black and brown voices in our culture of advertising. So sometimes it's hard to communicate ideas of the culture with really fancy sounding words. I'm really bad at fancy sounding talk, guys, just to be honest. So sometimes with AI, it's able to communicate things that at a much more effective level than trying to sound extra fancy. It might just be getting images for art direction, like they just talked about in the last panel, or other facets of trying to just communicate early thinking in general, so you can get to new areas of creativity across the board.
Great. All right, I want to go back to Amanda and talk a little bit more about that tension with creativity and creative development and the ingenuity and ideas. How does it change original thought and output, and how have you been leveraging this within your teams and your clients?
Yeah, we actually had a little bit of a AI session yesterday, which was a great prep for this. And one of the things we talked about was really just everyone has access to the same LLM models. So what you get when you put your sort of prompts in, we're all going to get that back. And so if we use that creativity as baseline, everyone has it. How do we take it up a level? I think that's really interesting. I think Peter's the one who talked to us a little bit about the word tension, and ever since you said it, I've loved thinking about where, like, go after the tension. It's just such a powerful way to think about, where in the organization can AI layer in, and then how do we just push past that? Because that's what it really is going to be. And where AI today can't play is cultural relevance and emotion and connection with feelings and human beings. So, I mean, that to me it's scary, but it's also incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I want to kind of move into the risk-taking aspect of this and how you get clients to embrace this, because there are many clients that are restricting the use of AI, specifically Gen AI, in MSAs, or saying you can only use it for these purposes. There's a lot of fear around copyright and liability. So how are you getting clients comfortable with that risk aspect and bringing them along as you're also trying to educate your teams and get them to help the clients understand the value of test and learn and evolve and grow?
Well, I think there's the commercial side of the MSA, which is a difficult one, and we don't have enough time. There's 11 minutes left to get into that, but I know everyone in this room deals with that. I think there's a lack of understanding of what AI really is on the client side. And so a lot of them think of output, right? So they're thinking of copyright, trademark, all of those types of things where they want to mitigate the risk. And I think that's fine, but there's also all these other applications of AI to make us more efficient, whether that's agents, whether that's looking at econometric modeling, whatever it might be that we can actually use AI. We're like, no, that's an efficiency play, so it's not a one-size-fits-all in the MSA. I think as it relates to actual client work, I thought it was really fascinating. There was an article in Adweek right before the Super Bowl, and they said out of the 51 advertisers, 46 were staying away from truly AI, and no one was going as far as creating an entire spot with AI. They basically said, like, oh, other than OpenAI, I think was the outlier. And I think it just goes to the fact that people aren't ready for it. It was interesting, right? Everyone saw the Coke, probably the Coke Christmas or holiday ads with all the AI. And I think it's fine, like when you're dealing with polar bears, you can't go and create polar bears, right? They've been using CGI forever. But once it crosses over into humans, human likeness, human voice, I think that's where the people were generally kind of taken aback, going like, all right, ethically, where are we going with this? Is that where this is, where they're going to replace voice actors or characters in spots? And I think that's the risk taking and the risk balance that we have to consult with our clients about.
Did you want to add something, Michael?
No, I was just loving it. I just want to say yes. I was just co-signing you, brother.
Well,
Thanks, Michael.
And earlier we saw Abigail from Google sharing examples of Google tools that you can use to take what was basic image and didn't have maybe any design or background or text and adding voice, synthetic voice. And the question I have is, what do we as an industry need to be doing around the ethics of that in terms of disclosure? You made a really important point around, are consumers even ready for this? And marketers are staying away because they don't want to deal with that controversy, not only from an industry perspective, but let alone from the consumer backlash that happened. So I'm just curious if any of you have any thoughts on that, because that was not addressed, and I did ask Abigail after, and I don't think it's really being considered at this point. And you even heard in the previous conversation, there was a discussion with SAG-AFTRA for an agency that's a signatory agency, because that is obviously a very big issue. And we saw that last year with the WGA and the actors strike. And for those who are signatory agencies, we have a contract negotiation coming up in just a very short period of time. So go ahead, Michael.
I don't know. I mean, I might be like off base in what I'm saying in general. I think there's a lazy way to embrace AI, which is like you just do a thing and just like output it. I think it's the equivalent of like using stock photos for most things. You wouldn't just like download a shitty stock photo and then put that out and like, there's your commercial. It's just another tool, like all the tools, and it's an ally it's more under the hood probably at the moment, where it's less like, I did this entire commercial with AI and that looks crazy, right? But I think fundamentally what it does for the work stream of the makers, which is mostly what I represent. I have the art background, so I have experience in 3D from programming and video editing and all that jazz. Everything is made, I'm like 10x'd in every single facet of the making process. So I think it's much more of an under the hood thing. In terms of it being out in the world, I don't know if it's like wear it on like a badge. You know, I don't know if that's the best way to go about it at all. Maybe at first when it was like, whoa, this is what AI does. But yeah, I think it's more an under the hood, everything's changed.
Well, and I think it's weird to think about it, and I think we talked about this a little. It's like with CGI and animation, we were okay with it.
That's right.
But why are we not okay with it when it's not a real... so I think if you're impersonating someone else, that's dangerous.
Yes.
But if you're just creating something, that's the same thing as animation and CGI. I don't know if anyone saw the response, one of the responses to Kanye's Super Bowl ad.
He's a piece of shit sometimes. Sorry, guys. I'm
But
apologizing on behalf of black-ass Kanye. Moron.
Thank you for that apology.
Yeah. The thing I saw was a bunch of actors being impersonated. I have no idea if they were had permission to do it. I hope that they did give it, but it got me. I was like, that was the fastest response I've ever seen. And then someone said, this is completely AI generated. So if you haven't seen it, it's a really interesting response. It was had to have been done overnight, and that's an impersonation of someone where I can understand. Not related to that issue, where impersonation is an issue, but in general, animation and CGI feels like territory that's not that different.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in real quick. I do think what Michael said is spot on, is that it's under the hood. And to me, most of the applications are B2B. I think when you start getting into, like we say, deep fakes or other sorts of things that are impersonating humans, I think that's where the ethical and societal kind of forces come back to us and say, like, we're not quite ready for that, but maybe soon we will be. And I think we'll see similar things with reasoning and logic. I think that's an excellent point that Amanda made. Next decisions, it's going to be that conversation. And I think it's like going to be like, well, what is it doing for strategy? What is it doing for all the things that we place high value on as agencies that are not commodities? I mean, we're dealing with output that can be commoditized, but when you're dealing with strategic input and thinking, I think that's going to be another tension for this, for this industry to wrestle with.
Yeah, I think these are all really important conversations that will continue to be had, and working with clients and making sure that we share learnings and what's happening as we go is going to be so critical. And Allison was talking earlier about the regulatory environment, both at the federal and state level. I mean, there's just so much that's going to transpire over the 3, 6, 9, 12 next months, however much we have in
Just
terms of
going
the way this is
quarterly.
going to evolve. Exactly.
When you said 3-6, I thought you were going to say mafia right there. But it didn't come out.
All right, this has been incredibly helpful. I would like to move to key takeaways because you all have great key takeaways, and then to Q&A. So please make sure you go to Slido or into the EventMobi app to add your questions. So I'm gonna let each of them share their key takeaways, starting with Peter and going on down to Amanda and Micöl.
Yeah, I'll be fast. I mean, it's just pay attention to the tension in your organization, where that is, and then focus your attention there. Because, again, I think what we're seeing with the fear of the technology or fear it's going to replace us, all of that, I think there's a lot of noise in the media. Don't pay attention to it. See what it can do to make your organization better, faster, stronger, smarter.
I'm using that. I love it. So I think I made up this acronym, but really it was my 16-year-old son. I looked on the internet and on ChatGPT, and it didn't exist. But if it does exist, whoever made it up, thank you. So I think human AI loop is something that I just keep on thinking in my head all the time. So if I just keep thinking hail, so it's amazing to use it, but humans have to stay in the loop because we can stop the bad things from happening because we're paying attention. So I just keep, every time I'm using it, I'm like, okay, don't just take the output. You have to put the human spin on it. So hail.
And some might add to the victors for those Michigan fans, too.
Go Blue.
I'm a Georgia fan. Go Dogs.
Yeah. So I think this technological achievement that AI is it harkens back to a bar, if I will. It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine, Salt and Pepper, and Heavy D up in the limousine. Anyway, I'm just being bullshit with that. But I really think from the maker's standpoint, you're fucked if you don't embrace AI, if you're not digging actively, at least for me, in terms of hiring and finding people. You have to be a hunter as a creative right now. Going back to maybe when you were in college and just were like digging, like, what am I going to do? Am I a 3D modeler? Am I an editor? Am I whatever, what have you? I think AI across the board isn't just from creative for creative's sake. I think fundamentally on all fronts and across, strategy or account or PM, everybody's going to be affected. Their work streams are going to be affected. Your competitor is using it if you are not using it, and that will instantly date you out. And I just think it's very, very important to accept this is not an optional workflow. Your competitor will smoke you if you do not accept the adjustment of AI. Find how it works for you. Whatever you do right now that's getting all y'all paid and you're doing well in your life, you plus AI just makes you a 10x multiplier. And then you do it again, you find the new tool that's coming out tomorrow. It's gonna make you a 20x multiplier. So you plus AI is the crusher, so.
It is great key takeaways. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn to Kevin to see if we have any key questions for this group.
We do indeed. For automating our drudgery work with AI, we've been having trouble knowing what we need to do specifically, how to start, step-by-step suggestions, how to best start.
The drudgery, what did that, say that, what is it?
The drudgery work, the crap we have to do.
I think it's that low-level work that Amanda was
yeah.
talking about.
For us, it's anything in your organization that is tedious, can be automated, and is causing friction. I listened to a podcast this morning that talked about Claude being able to actually use your computer and do things on your behalf. So think about, we still have timesheets, sorry. But if your computer can just know what you're doing all day long, you never have to do a timesheet because your computer will just do it for you. And my phone is linked to my computer, so it knows when I'm on the phone too. It's like, we don't have to do timesheets anymore. Yeah.
That's your agentic world taking over.
Yeah, there's so many, it's kind of, we would talk forever. There's so many of those things that just like suck to do in general are just tedious processes, whether it's making a mood board or finding images in general. There's so many, it's hard to talk about. That's kind of why I'm saying such aggressiveness about AI. There's a lot of tedious processes, to your point, will be.
Do y'all do timesheets?
I'm not allowed to say.
No,
we don't do that. Hello, come to majority. I'm just playing. But yeah.
I would say ask AI, feed it what you're doing, and it will also give
Hey,
you
is this 8 hours?
feedback on what you could be doing better.
Is this 8 hours?
Go ahead, Kevin. Why do we need panelists? We can just have synthetic personas up here.
The next question we had is, how have the agency leaders dealt with the unconscious bias with an AI?
That's actually a very deep conversation. Okay, so, oh God, I don't want to get into it too deep. I'm very worried about this actually because AI is a reflection of what's been put into it. Man, we need diverse minds involved in that process.
Well, and I think critical thinking is going to be the muscle that we have to continue to flex. So if you stop thinking critically and let AI, if you put both things into the AI and say, give me both sides of the argument, like, you're not doing any critical thinking. And so it's that muscle. You're just going to have to keep flexing that muscle all the time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think, what is it? Only 20% of known human knowledge is actually written. 80% is spoken. And so, like, when you look at culturally over time, I mean, how do you account for things that aren't written? And I think that's the next evolution I'd love to see within, some of the AI models. And I think having open platforms will help somewhat solve that, but I think it's an interesting area.
It's also really interesting as we're now shifting to this conversational search and leveraging voice in a much more robust way. This has been such a great conversation. So thank you, Peter, Amanda, Micöl. So appreciate it. I hope it's been helpful for all of you. And stay tuned for the grand finale. I'm going to turn it back to Ash.
Yeah.